gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, episode 40, our final episode of the year. What's up, Dom?
Happy holidays.
If you guys aren't watching this on video, unfortunately, Jordan isn't able to join us this week either. He's still suffering from a loss of voice. He said he's striking with the voice actors. That was a nice little joke he made. But
just having a hard time talking.
Yeah. So last week we actually talked about our predictions for next year. The last episode of the year, I wanted it to be our game of the year, personal and as a group. So the way it's going to be going down in this episode is we're going to be talking about each of our individual lists for game of the year, and then our consensus top 5 for game of the year. So we're going to get into it. We're going to go through Jordan's list first. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us, but he has a list for us, and we'll talk about it between Dom and I. So his honorable mentions. First off, we have Telltale Batman. I didn't play this. I'm going to get around to it now that the holiday break's on us and episode 5 came out. You play this, Dom, so do you think this deserves to be an honorable mentions at the very least?
Yeah, absolutely. This is some of Telltale's best work. Of course, I haven't played Tales from the Borderlands or Wolf Among Us, which are supposed to be pretty good as well. But this is right up there with Walking Dead for me. So.
Yeah. Next up on his honorable mentions, Witcher 3 Blood and Wine, which technically isn't a new game. A lot of people make the argument because there's like a lot of content there and it's bigger than some games. But he has Witcher 3, shocker. Jordan put something with Witcher 3 in his list.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I didn't play Blood and Wine yet. I haven't even finished Witcher 3 yet, but I've heard great things, so it's no surprise there.
I wonder what the percentage of people who started that game finished it.
I don't know.
You know?
Yeah, and like a lot of people have made the case of like it's too dense, yada yada. We've gone over that plenty of times before. For me, it was just like something else came out. I don't remember what, and then I never got back to it. But it's definitely a game I need to go back and finish because it's a gorgeous game. It's super well made, and it's a shame that I haven't gone back to play it. Will I 100% it or beat it? I don't know, but I want to get back to actually playing it one way or the other. The other 2 honorable mentions on his list are 2 indie games. Severed from the guys who make Guacamelee. Yeah, Drinkbox, I believe.
That is them? Okay.
Yeah. That's the one where it's like it came out on Vita, and it's like a hallway or like tunnel navigation where you like move left and right and stuff like that. It looked pretty interesting. A lot of people liked it a lot. And Fury, which I'm not too familiar with, but it was a hit on PlayStation, I believe. A lot of people did like Fury.
Yeah, it was a free PS Plus game, I believe.
Ooh,
I didn't play it ever, but yeah.
That's going to get in a lot of people's minds if it's out there for free, so that's good. Let's get into his actual top 5. Coming in at number 5 is Overcooked. This is, we talked about a couple of times this year, Dom, you want the return of couch co-op. You feel that like, I think a lot of people feel as if couch co-op was kind of going away, and it seems like now it's coming back. And Overcooked is a great exercise in couch co-op patience. A lot of people love it. If you're not familiar, it's a game where 2 people on the same screen, or up to 4 people, I believe. It's 1 to 4 people. And you work in teams trying to make dishes and get them out on time, and there's a timer, and it kind of works with that whole star system. So if you do really good and you get perfect, you get 3 stars. If you do okay, you get 2 stars. Terrible, you get 1 star. Overcooked seems like a cool game. I never got around to playing it. It's on almost every platform. Did you get a chance to play Overcooked, Dom?
No. I don't want to play it by myself. I don't think that's how it's meant to be played, although I think there is an option for that. But
yeah,
definitely don't want to play it with other people because I'm not someone who has a lot of patience with others. I just know that this would just cause huge issues in my household if I were to turn it on.
Yeah, it'll do more damage than good, right? So if you're gonna be playing this, definitely play with somebody that either they know you have good patience, or you know they have good patience, or they're okay with you not being patient.
Right, if they're okay with being yelled at, and they understand that, in the heat of the moment,
Exactly. Number 4, this is a game you had experience with, Housemarque's Alien Nation. This came out earlier in the year. I believe a lot of people felt this wasn't as good as Dead Nation, but it still was a pretty solid game, right?
Yeah, I never played Alien Nation. I did play Dead Nation this year.
Dead Nation, my bad, okay.
But they're similar enough. I mean, it's the same game, right? Just aesthetically. There are different environments, different setting and all that, and it's just a PS4 game, whereas Dead Nation is a Vita game. So I'm sure it looks quite a bit better too, but same idea, twin-stick shooter kind of thing. Dead Nation was really fun, but I think a lot of people did like Alien Nation too. But.
I think some of the complaints were they made it a little bit unnecessarily obtuse. Like, I think some people some people felt that Dead Nation was good the way it was, and it seems like Alienation was overcomplicated for no reason except for being complicated. But it still was a solid game. It got high marks. So number 3 on his personal list, he has Final Fantasy 15. So last time we talked to Jordan, he said he wasn't too far in. I think he said like an hour and a half. So over the course of the last couple of weeks, he's probably put some more time into that. I haven't played it yet. It's a game I want to get around to. We've talked about it numerous times. I'm not familiar with Final Fantasy. I want to jump in somehow, but it's kind of like that Metal Gear Solid situation. A little bit different, obviously, because it's not one whole story, but they're all different. But yeah, it's interesting. Final Fantasy 15 definitely has a lot of people giving it high praise, and a lot of people saying that it's an okay game, and it's weird what they're doing with the updates of kind of completing the story, right? So what's your interpretation of Final Fantasy 15?
Yeah, kind of the same as you, because I've never touched anything in the entire series ever. And this seems like it's as good of an entry point as any of the games in the series. But if you look back, like before this, what Final Fantasy game am I going to go back and play today? It's just not like, as someone who never played any older JRPGs, like none of them are just going to hold up. Yep. So this would be a good spot to jump in. I'm really curious about it. I was surprised at how well it was received critically. So yeah, I'm kind of curious too. I might pick it up one day if it's on sale.
Well, I think the big thing too is it's not turn-based combat anymore, really. So that's an easier entry point for people who are not familiar with JRPGs. And also, if I don't get around to this, the Final Fantasy VII remake is definitely the one I will get into, just because.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely want to do that as well.
Final Fantasy 15 has been in development for so long, and it was unsure if it was going to be good. A lot of people do think it's good, which is awesome. But Final Fantasy VII is regarded as a great game. You know, some people think that other Final Fantasies are better, but they never say that it's a bad game. And as long as they don't do too much to it, I'm definitely in for Final Fantasy VII. So it's not too surprising 15's on his list. Jordan likes his JRPGs. Number 2, Ratchet and Clank. This is the remaster / up-res of Ratchet and Clank with a few minor tweaks. Beautiful. Apparently, it looks even more gorgeous on a PS4 Pro. You played Ratchet and Clank, so him having it too, is that a surprise, or is that, you know?
No, it's a great game. And I would have anticipated he had this high on his list, knowing he loves third-person action games. It just looks so good. And it's hard to say much else about it, but it just looks so. It's so pleasant to look at. It just makes you feel good, and then it's also fun. There's lots of cool, creative, different kinds of weapons. It's a fun little game.
Yeah,
right up Jordan's alley.
Yeah, I think it's a great experience, and I think it's like, for better or worse, video game junk food of, like, you know, a lot of people who bought that game already played it the first time around, so it's like I just want to re-experience it the way I imagined in my head and not the way it actually looked. So yeah, I'm not surprised there. Number 1 in his list, Quantum Break. This isn't a surprise either. He's talked about this being his game of the year for a long time, and it was kind of going to be surprising if anything passed it. He loves superhero games. He owns a PlayStation. His family also owns an Xbox, so it's interesting that an Xbox One exclusive is his game of the year. If you didn't notice, shocker to most people, Jordan didn't have Uncharted 4 on his list, which, if you follow the show, that's not surprising. He has his own opinions on that. But yeah, Quantum Break's a solid game. I'll probably get into it more when we talk about it, because it is on my list, spoiler alert. But yeah, it's a solid game. It does feel like a superhero game without the guy being technically a superhero. So I understand completely why he enjoyed this game. The shooting mechanics are great. The time powers are great. Yeah, so it's interesting that this isn't getting talked about more for people's Game of the Year lists. As far as it being on the list, I doubt it'll be on a majority of people's the Game of the Year, but it seems like it's getting forgotten, and I do think it's a very solid game. So yeah, do you want to go next to your Game of the Year list?
Yeah, let's do it. So I have a couple honorable mentions as well. So let me swing through those really quick. First of all, Telltale's Batman. Talked about it a ton already. Really, great Telltale game. Absolutely, despite some technical issues. Next on the list, Fire Emblem Fates. I played, I can't even remember what the two of them are called. I played the one that's easier.
Conquest and Birthright?
Yep. Yeah. Birthright, that was what I played. Really cool. Super. I was brand new to that whole genre. So I had fun. The story was engaging. The gameplay was interesting. So next on the list, Battlefield 1. So I just wanted to point this out. Even though I didn't play the actual game, I probably put about 8 to 10 hours into just the beta. And that says a lot, being that it was just one map and 2 game modes that I played all that time. in one single 24-hour day. So that tells you something. Maybe I should have bought that game, but that tells you a little bit about, how I felt about it at the time. So next on the list, Fallout 4's DLC. So there were, I think, 4 different DLC packs, 3 of which I played. There was one about some robots. I can't remember what they called that. That was pretty good. But the Piece de Resistance, Far Harbor, awesome. Bahaba. Yeah, that was a great piece of DLC. Really big, whole giant new section of the map. Story that was more interesting than most of the other story that was going on in Fallout 4. So really enjoyed that. And then Nuka World was actually probably my favorite piece of DLC for Fallout 4. Giant theme park they put you in called Nuka World. Just tons of personality and life going on in that place. I thought it was really fun. So the last piece of DLC, I didn't even touch the vault building.
Okay, yeah.
Hubbub. I never got into any of the crafting or any of the base building stuff in that game. The crafting of like guns and armor was really cool, but I didn't really go near any of the other building stuff beyond what they required in the game. So I had no interest in that one really. But overall, Fallout 4 wrapped up in a big old box of all this DLC and everything else. Awesome game.
Was it worth the season pass?
I think so, especially because I got it. It's crazy to me that they actually raised the price of their season pass from $30 to $50, right around when they were going to drop the first piece of DLC. And then they told people that was going to happen like a week before they actually raised the price.
Yeah,
which was probably a good strategy because a lot of people were probably like me and said, "Oh shit, well I'm going to buy that season pass now."
Yeah,
is that last piece of motivation I needed because I knew I was going to play the DLC one way or another. I think it was worth the $30. Even I would say it was even worth the $50. Of course, that's if you're really into Fallout 4 still. So, loved all that. Tons of fun. So those are some honorable mentions. On to my top 5 games of the year. So for these 5, not necessarily my personal favorite games in this order, although they are, but that's not what this list would happen to be based on, the criteria I use in my head. But just the games that I thought were just the best games as a total package that were released this year that I played or had enough experience with to know. So, number 5, Doom.
Solid game. Yep.
Yeah, definitely deserves to be in most people's top lists for 2016. Awesome game. There's not much I can think of to say is bad about this game. It does everything it wants to do, and it does it very well. And it does not shy away from the fact that it's a Doom game.
Yep.
And it's awesome in that sense. What do they call it? Glory kills are super satisfying. Even after 8 to 10 hours of playing the campaign, those still were satisfying. Even though you're seeing them over and over again, it still was so much fun. So Doom was a great game. You mentioned multiplayer was a little lackluster. I never even went near it. But that's, had it been a little more positively received, I might have ended up, checking it out. Well, that maybe it could have moved it higher on the list, but I'm not too worried about it. I don't necessarily detriment it based on that, but that's one thing that it could have had that if it were amazing multiplayer that could have pushed it higher up. But
also, I think another big part of it that not many people talk about is, so a lot of people love Halo, and they love the single player, and they love the multiplayer, and a lot of people love Forge. The thing with Doom is that it had a snap map mode, which allowed you to make your own maps and game modes and stuff like that. And I think that's very, it's going under the radar. I think a lot of people aren't talking about that because the single player is so solid and the multiplayer is so lackluster. But snap map is a third mode, and it's a very strong mode. And it's for people who love that universe and love those tools. And there's people making awesome stuff with it, Just like when you give anybody tools and they're that invested, they're going to come up with some really cool stuff, i.e. Griffball in Halo. So, I agree with you. Doom was a solid game. It's funny because people tend to forget how long that game was in development, and people were actually kind of worried, and this was the first signs of Bethesda not giving out review copies right away, and the game turned out to be great. So, I think Doom's a solid game. I'm happy to see it on your list. So,
I'm glad you point out the snap map stuff because I didn't go near that either. But from the sounds of it, it's not getting the attention it deserves. So. Let's see. Next on the list, number 4, Dishonored 2. I had a ton of fun with this game as well. And I've actually just heard a news story today that it should have already gotten or is soon to get a patch for a New Game Plus mode that substantially changes the replay value that you'll get out of this. So instead of just starting a new game with the other character that you didn't play as the first time, now you can start a New Game Plus game where you start as the other character, but you now have access to both of their abilities if you level up. And you get to keep, being a New Game Plus, you get to keep all the levels you had gained already from the last game. And all the, what they call bone charms, which are different, varying things you can equip to change statuses of certain things. That's about the best description you could give them. And then all the runes you get to keep that actually gave you your level. So it's cool that stuff carries over. And I think that, to me, that you asked me a while back, a couple weeks back, if I was going to get back into this game for a second playthrough anytime soon. And my answer was probably not soon, but I do want to eventually. And after hearing about that, I'm like, yeah, I want to get back into this now. Super good incentive to keep playing the game. Probably helps with keeping people from selling it secondhand, that kind of stuff too. So, but I've said it before, Dishonored 2, awesome game. The level of freedom it gives you to do literally everything it's phenomenal. It's hard to explain it. I've not played a game that gives you that same feeling of freedom in everything you want to do. There's, for each mission, there's 5 different ways you can reach that outcome or more or less, but then there's 10 different ways that you can do each of those 5 different things. It does something that I don't think many games have achieved. So no regrets having that number 4 on the list here. Number 3, Gears of War 4. I absolutely love this game, dude. Like, you and Jordan need to pick this up. I don't know how much you were into these games previously, but I loved all the other games except I never played Judgment. But 1 through 3, I absolutely adored. So I knew, this was one I didn't even plan on playing this year. I told myself I was going to wait till it dropped. It went on sale to pick it up, but I couldn't help it. And shortly after it came out, I was like, oh, I need to play this. Like, I just have to. And thank you, Microsoft, for making your first-party games available on PC so I could do so.
Yep.
That's an awesome thing they did. I was skeptical about how it...
You didn't have to buy a whole new console to play it. You're just like, oh, I got to buy it and play it on my PC, so...
Yeah. No, when they first announced that, I was kind of skeptical of whether or not it was smart for them, like profit-wise. But I could care less. And if nothing else, even if they're losing tons of money, they're building a whole ton of goodwill on that.
Yep.
But I don't think it's... I think it's a great decision by them, and I'm sure it will, in the long run, help them tremendously. So, Gears of War, super fun game. Same gameplay that I was already so in love with. A couple tweaks, a couple new guns, and a few added features, nothing crazy. But in 4, the story was way more engaging than any of the previous games. Even, the whole thing with Marcus and Dom and whichever one's wife it was, and something went on. Point being, I don't even hardly remember it all.
Yeah.
Whereas in 4, I felt the story was much better. The way they kept Marcus around as that sort of mentor figure. No spoilers. I'm not going to say if something does or doesn't happen to him. I don't know. Well, I do know, but you don't if you didn't play it. But yeah, super fun game. And I don't know if I pointed this out before, but the very last mission of the game, one of the best missions in... Probably not up to that one in Titanfall that you keep pointing out, but the last mission of Gears of War 4, they reward you in such a great way for playing through that whole game. I don't want to say too much, but it's really cool what they did with this last mission. A little bit different than most games in that sense, but I don't want to give it away. So, number 2 on the list, Dark Souls 3. Now, this was where I had to make a choice between 2 and 1. But Dark Souls 3, honestly, probably the best Dark Souls game, Soulsborne, whatever. The best, one of From Software's games, I think. Technically, gameplay design, and everything else, I think it's by far the best Dark Souls game. Everything about it was pretty darn near perfect. Haven't touched the DLC yet, but I'm going to get into that at some point. Even though I just said all that about this game, I still personally am always going to like Dark Souls 1 more. Just because that was my first my entry point to the series, and it just brought me, introduced me to a whole new style of game, and really taught me a lot about myself too, and kind of gives you that sort of patience with yourself, different than the kind with Overcooked, because I can't put up with others who are incompetent. But if I made the mistake myself, I can own that and learn from it, and it's such a rewarding game. But yeah, Dark Souls 3, getting back to it, great game. Same with all the other ones. I'm not huge into the story and the lore around these. A lot of people get into it, and for what I do know about it, it's really cool. But that's not the main draw for me. It's that gameplay and the feeling of reward when you finally beat that boss that's been kicking your ass for 30 attempts. It's like there's nothing else that gives you that feeling. Maybe winning the Super Bowl. I don't know. Number 1 on the list, no surprise here, Uncharted 4. We've talked about it in previous episodes, but this is pretty darn neat. I'm not going to say it's a perfect game, but to me, it's a 10 out of 10. There's nothing that I really would have wanted them to do better or change in this game. It's just, it does everything as good as it possibly can. It improves upon the previous titles in the franchise in every way. The story is easily the best that they've had in any Uncharted game. Presentation, the way the cinematic elements and cutscenes blend in with the actual gameplay is just second to none. Uncharted 4 is a fantastic game. I'll leave it at that.
So that's your game of the year, your piece de resistance.
Yes. I feel like I've been talking for half an hour, but yeah.
Yeah, I like your list. It's that choice there between Dark Souls 3 and Uncharted 4 is a tough one, but somebody had to make it. Yeah.
I didn't take it lightly. I put a lot of thought into it. So.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get into my list. I have 10 games total, but I'll just do the top, 6 through 10 as honorable mentions. I'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. So number 10, I have The Division. This came out in February, I believe. It's a game with a lot of flaws, but it does have a lot of character in it too, and I think it's interesting. A lot of people, like myself, compare it to it's a kind of like a loot chaser, kind of like Destiny, but I actually enjoyed this a lot more than Destiny. The shooting mechanics for both games are solid, but The Division had a lot more personality to me, and it's funny because I'm a lot more of a space sci-fi guy, so you would think that Destiny would be my thing, but The Division, I just liked the post-apocalyptic nature. I liked the design of it. I thought it was very well done. I thought the details were very good. I haven't jumped into its new update yet, which seems very interesting. The survival mode, which is kind of like H1Z1-esque, where everyone's put on this map and the last person standing wins. Matches can last up to 2 hours, which is kind of crazy. So I don't know if I'm willing to dive in for that. I'll last till the end. Either way, Division's a solid game. Number 9, Firewatch. This is a game that drew a lot of controversy because a lot of people felt as if it hyped itself up to be something it wasn't. I strongly disagree with that. I think Overwatch has a fantastic story, though it's not very deep. It is interesting.
Firewatch.
Yeah, did I say Overwatch? Sorry.
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah. So Firewatch, its story is very interesting. I don't want to spoil the end of it, but one of the complaints people had is that at the end of it, it kind of draws you into the end of the story that has nothing to do with anything else that was going on. But actually, there's a lot of footprints in the grass along the way that kind of lead you towards this conclusion if you pay attention. And I felt that the voice acting was very phenomenal because it's kind of like one of the major proponents of this game. But the game looks beautiful itself too. I think there's a lot of indie games that did a lot of stuff better, but I do appreciate experiencing Firewatch. What else? Let's see here. Another honorable mention. This isn't in my top 10, but Virginia. I actually wrote a review on this. You can check it out at our website, controlledinterest.com. Virginia is a very solid game. It's another indie game. It doesn't have a single line of dialogue in it, but it's a very solid game. I like it a lot. It's very weird, and it's very sci-fi-y, but it's very crime drama as well. If you had a chance to play it, definitely pick it up. It's a really, really interesting experience. Number 7, Titanfall 2. A lot of people had issues with this game. It didn't sell very well because of its timing of it releasing. I thought the single player was as creative as any shooter campaign I've played in a very long time. I've talked about Effect and Cause being one of the best FPS missions of the last 10 years. I wholeheartedly agree with that. The multiplayer is good. I think it's very solid. I think Titanfall 2 is a very solid game. You can put it up there with the Call of Duties and the Battlefields, if not better in some instances. But yeah, Titanfall 2 I think was a tremendous experience. I'm super happy to play it. I'll play anything that the Respawn guys that were formerly Infinity Ward will make. Number 6, the Final Destination. The Final Destination. Jesus, the Final Station, which essentially, in some ways, at the end of the game, there is a final destination. It's as the zombie slash train simulator I talked about practically ad nauseum this year. Here and there. It's very cool. It's a small indie game, side scroller. I like the mix of genres. I like that you kind of piece the story together. It's funny. I like stories that video games have very strong stories and tell it to you very well. But I also like games where it's super obtuse and you have to kind of piece together the story yourself too. Both of those can be done really well, and I enjoy both of those when they're like top notch. So yeah, Final Station. I think that's a great game too. Put it on your wish list. It'll be on a Steam sale soon, and you should definitely pick it up and play it because it's great. It's also available on Xbox One, I believe, also on PS4. Number 5, Quantum Break. We talked about this for Jordan's list. I'll get into it a little bit. Quantum Break is a fantastic Microsoft exclusive. Whether or not Remedy continues it or if they go back to Alan Wake, I think Quantum Break is a great game. It's a great standalone game. The time manipulation is fantastic. I like time travel a lot. I think a lot of people do. And they have some great, phenomenal actors in this. My only downside to this game, like I talked about in last week's episode when I was talking about playing it, is that the TV show portions are good. Like, I think they were an interesting take, but there's a couple of actors in that TV show that are just bad actors. I don't think it has anything to do with the writing. I think the writing's fine. There was just some people that were terrible actors, and I'm assuming it had to be a budget thing, because I mean, they got Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, who he was probably a pretty penny, you know, and the main actor, obviously, and then also, I forgot his name, sorry about that, but the guy from Lord of the Rings, who's the brother of the main character. But yeah, I thought the game was solid. I think if you own an Xbox, it is a must play. If you're able to get this on sale, I think you definitely should. It is, in my opinion, one of the best games of this year. It's very fun. The time powers are really awesome, and yeah, I think it's a really cool superhero game. Funny thing too, so the main actor of Quantum Break is the guy who plays Iceman in the X-Men movies, the X-Men franchise. And early in the game, when somebody sees his powers for the first time, he's like, "What are you, some kind of X-Man?" It's a really funny throwback to that of him, his real acting in real life. So I thought that was funny and interesting. Next up on the list, Doom. Dom talked about this already. Fantastic game. There's nothing bad about this game in its single player. Multiplayer is lackluster. Snap maps fantastic. Best soundtrack of 2016, hands down.
Oh yeah,
the soundtrack
definitely.
for Doom is fantastic, as you saw at the Game Awards if you watched it. Excuse me. It felt so satisfying, and yeah, the story is there, but that's not the point of Doom, you know. And I just love that, like, even at the beginning of the game, you kind of wake up from the dead, kind of, and it's just like there's occult stuff, and it's like it knows what it is, and I appreciate that. I think it's kind of like what Duke Nukem's been trying to do forever, but this actually nails it. I think Duke Nukem tends to be over the top just for being over the top's sake, and I think Doom is doing it from its sense of personality. I thought Doom was fantastic, and I can't wait for the follow-up if they're called Doom 2, like if this is just a reimagining or a relaunch of the franchise. So can't wait for that. That'll be definitely a day one for me, the follow-up to this game. Number 3, Dark Souls 3. Dom did a fantastic job covering everything, so I don't know what else is left to say. I do agree with you that though this is the best game in the 3 games, I do like Dark Souls the most just because it's that nostalgia. I never played a game like Dark Souls, just like you, and it was different, right? And
it changes you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Toy Story franchise. Like, Toy Story 1 will always be my favorite, but 2 and 3 definitely make those movies better, and they tweak what made the original Toy Story good and even do them in a more refined, better way. But the first Toy Story will always be my favorite. It's kind of the same thing, except in Toy Story 2 isn't a way far departure than the rest, kind of like Dark Souls 2 was. But yeah, Dark Souls 3 is fantastic. A lot of people have some issues with Ashes of Ariandel, the DLC. I thought it was pretty interesting. It was kind of short, but yeah, I think it's a shame that we're not going to be getting a Dark Souls game for a while. Hopefully that means we'll be getting Bloodborne 2 for PlayStation gamers, but From is definitely one of, if not the most underrated developer in the world, because their games are phenomenal. And Naughty Dog does make solid games, but they do get a lot of credit for it. I think From doesn't get as much credit as they deserve. They were left off of a lot of categories in Game Awards this year, and it's kind of a shame because Dark Souls 3 is a phenomenal game. It is one of the best games of the year. So Number 2, I have Overwatch. This is a game that I've had a talk about to Jordan and Dom because they don't really play multiplayer games, and Overwatch is a fantastic game. Blizzard, when they decide to go into a genre of video game, they nail it completely. You can look at their resume. They have the MMO, they have practically, you would say they had the hero shooter, and like they just do everything they go into, they do it so well. And Overwatch is a game, it's probably the only game on this list that a majority of people will still be playing 5 to 10 years from now. A lot of these games people go back and play, but Overwatch does have the most legs out of any game released this year. And the way they constantly update the game and improve it and change the meta and improve problems and listen to player feedback and hold events. They held a Halloween event. Well, they held an Olympic event with the special Olympic game mode. They held a Halloween event with a special Halloween game mode and loot boxes. And they're doing the same thing for Christmas. So, like, they're keeping people involved, but it doesn't seem, like, bad or nasty. It's very genuine. I can go on and on about Overwatch, the fact that it allows anybody to play. You can not be good at shooters and play a healer or a tank and feel perfectly fine and feel like you're contributing to the team. The fact that they shy away from being a toxic environment where you can never see your teammates' kills and deaths. You only see your own statistics, which provides a lot of breathing room for you not to feel so angry at the rest of your team when a lot of other shooters, that's kind of in the forefront of you seeing, like, oh, I'm doing the best on my team, the rest of my team is garbage. Yeah, and it relies on teamwork, and I think there's a character for literally anybody who wants to play. There's a character for any kid to relate with, which I think is huge. They have characters from every creed and walk of life. They have an Indian character, a Native American character, an Egyptian character, a white guy, a black guy. Like, they have something for everybody to relate to, and I think that's very solid because it allows everybody to get into this game and feel as if they're a part of it. It's not just a bunch of white dudes on the screen, right? So yeah, I think Overwatch is a fantastic game. I can go on and on, but sadly it is not my personal game of the year. So my personal game of the year is actually Inside. This game's fantastic. It's from Playdead, the guys who made Limbo. I think there's a weird stigma that a lot of people feel as if an indie game can't be game of the year, which I think is really weird. Half of my list is indie games, now that I'm looking at it. The likes of Firewatch, Final Station, Inside, Virginia. Inside is a fantastic game. It's the most pixel perfect game made this year. I think second would probably be Overwatch, in my opinion. But Inside, every animation that's there, every little aspect of that game, every little piece and art detail, like, it's just so well made. When you hear this game took 6 years to make, but it's only a 4 to 6 hour experience, and you go and play it and you understand that, like, yeah, okay, I understand that because it's so detail oriented. And the story is obtuse, and the ending is kind of weird, but I like that. I like having to figure out the conclusion of a story myself, if that's the purpose of the game. I strongly believe that this game, if there is ever a video game art museum, this will be in it. This is as solid a video game as it is a piece of art. Yeah, I think it's so well done, and I can't wait for their next game, because Limbo was good, and I enjoyed Limbo a lot. This game blows Limbo out of the water. Like, Inside is a phenomenal masterpiece in gameplay and just art and art direction and design, and it is a phenomenal game. Like, the fact that it also came to PlayStation is great. I know a lot of people were like, oh, this is, Microsoft's exclusive, let's hold it near and dear, but the fact that more people get to play this is awesome, because, man, is this game, it's just phenomenal. Like, it's one of those games that I might actually play once a year, once every couple of years, just to get reminded of how good of a game it is. Yeah, so that's my personal list. Let's get into our cumulative controlled interests top 5, and then we'll announce our game of the year. We kind of made our own lists and came to some decisions as to what the top 5 were. We all had very different lists for the most part, but we were able to figure out what exactly made our top 5. So we'll go through that. Number 5 is Overwatch. You heard me talk about this. Though Jordan and Dom didn't play it, Dom and I were discussing of, like, though he hasn't played it, he respects it and he understands how important it was. You want to talk a little bit about that, Dom?
Yeah, because we had to do some tiebreakers basically, and I had to make that decision sort of even though I don't have any personal experience with this game. Like, I've heard so much about it, and I can acknowledge and understand what it is, and how frankly it's a great game. Even though I haven't played it myself, I can still say that. Heard enough about it. I mean, it can't be bad.
Yeah. Next up on the list, my personal game of the year. It comes in at number 4, Inside. You just heard me have a big spiel about it if you're listening to the whole show. But yeah, Inside's a fantastic game. I really hope, I think Jordan owns it. He just hasn't gotten around to playing it. I really hope Dom gets a chance to play it too, maybe on his Vita through, what is it called? I always forget the name.
Remote play.
Yeah, remote play. I think this is a must-play game. I liked it a lot. It's not a long experience, but it definitely is worth the time invested in it. Yeah, so Inside's number 4. Number 3, this is a game that both Jordan and I loved, Quantum Break. Dom didn't play this. Jordan, obviously, it was his favorite game of the year. For me, it was in my top 5. I believe I had it at number 3 or number 4. Yeah, 4, I think. Yeah, Quantum Break's a solid game. It is, I would say it's right there with, I haven't played Gears of War 4, but looking at critical acclaim and stuff like that for Gears, I'm probably going to love Gears when I get around to playing it. But Quantum Break is one of the best Microsoft exclusives this year. It's probably better than Dead Rising 4. I haven't played Dead Rising 4, but everything I heard is like, Dead Rising 4 is a good game. It's not great. It's just there, which is fine. But
like that junk food you talked about.
Exactly. I think Quantum Break is a game that if you own an Xbox, you should definitely play it. If you like superheroes or superhero-esque games, you should definitely play it. And if you like time travel, super play it. Like, it's such a great experience.
It sounds like it's up my alley. I love to time travel. Yeah. I'm traveling just last week.
Yeah. Number 2, this was a tough decision when it came down to it, but number 2 is Uncharted 4. I didn't play it, so maybe you can say a little bit more about it and why it's so high on our list.
It's Uncharted 4. What else needs to be said? Oh,
yeah.
But no, we've said so much about it already. It's just a fantastic game. It's a fantastic experience. It's just so good. I don't know what else to say that it hasn't been said already, but well deserving of that spot.
Yeah, if I owned a PlayStation 4, I would have played it and I would have probably liked it. But I didn't get around to playing it, so I really have no opinions on it. And it seems like Uncharted 4 definitely seems like one of those games that, like, it's better if you're invested. Like, if you were part of the Uncharted franchise,
Definitely.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised, and I'm totally okay with it being number 2 on our list. It's obviously a fantastic game from what everybody says about it. Dark Souls 3 is our game of the year. You've heard our praises from Dom and I about this game. Just a little inside baseball on this. We kind of were trying to figure out what would be the game of the year because Dark Souls 3 and Uncharted 4 were tied in points, and we all individually voted, and Dom and I both voted for Dark Souls 3, and Jordan voted for Uncharted 4. So no one can ever say that Jordan never gave Uncharted 4 something. It was a really tough decision. Both those games are solid, but Dark Souls 3, like I said before in my little spiel, I think it's very underrated and underappreciated this year. Like, it wasn't in almost, like, there was a lot of categories it could have been in for the Game Awards or other places, and I think people are just, like, overlooking it. Like, From is one of the most underappreciated developers. Like, us not being able to have a Souls game for a while, people are going to understand what that means to the industry. And I think it's because it's Dark Souls. I think if they were making something that was a little more open and friendly to a lot more people, I think it'd be different. But the fact that they make these games that have such a committed community and they're known for being such hard games, I think they kind of have a stigma attached to them, and people don't like to talk about them as being a general consensus game of the year or up there for that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Dark Souls 3. What do you feel?
I will add that, you were right about the community for these games being very committed. They're also the biggest assholes, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
That's what the game is, and a lot of times you'll get, if you ask a certain question in a Dark Souls group, for example, you might get told best strategy is to get good, G-U-D, good,
G-I-T-G-U-D. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that being said, I mean, people are still friendly, and it's being a part of a community while playing these games for the first time is certainly the best way to do it, because you can learn and discover some of the secrets that you wouldn't normally, find on your own. You'd have no way of knowing. So kind of talking to people about that, about which NPCs will end up doing what, and who to kill, who not to kill, kind of stuff. But if you just straight up ask someone, "How do I beat this boss?" expect them to just reply GITGUD.
Also, if you're interested in becoming like a gameplay designer, you're just interested in what goes on to make a game, there are a lot of companies you can look at to see how formal and very linear level design and gameplay design are handled. But if you want something like, if you want to know how obtuse like level design is made, look at From. They have a map that kind of is attached completely, and they set it up in a way that is like super brilliant in a lot of ways. They're kind of Castlevania-esque system where you'll go through the map and you'll end up finding a door that opens up a shortcut to an area you were at 15 to 20 minutes ago, maybe even half an hour ago. I think their level design is brilliant. I think they definitely put a lot into making it very seamless, and like it's. Dark Souls is one of those games that you can look in the distance at a building and you'll be there later in the game. Like anything you see, you're more than likely going to be able to experience, and you can look back on everywhere you've been. And I think that's different to a lot of games. And man, I cannot praise that level design anymore, because it's phenomenal when you look at it from the big picture of like how everything seamlessly goes into one another. And it's I'm super happy to say Dark Souls 3 is our game of the year. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the best way I can think to describe it, in terms that most people are familiar with, is take a one of the dungeons from a 3D Zelda game and expand it 10 times the size and make it 10 times scarier and more difficult. It's that kind of like pre-thought that had to go into exactly where everything's placed and where each door is. But even on a way larger scale. That's what in every single, minus Dark Souls 2, what every Souls game was able to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal game, and I think one thing I want to say too is, I know it seems very intimidating to get into. I was actually super intimidated to ever play the first Dark Souls, because I heard it's the hardest game ever, it's so hard, this and that, and then I finally jumped in. And yeah, you need to have some patience, but man, it is one of the most satisfying games, because when you get it, you get it. Like, when you learn the Dark Souls dance, they're great. And it's just, oh man, beating bosses in that game is so satisfying. You feel like you earn everything you get in that game. Nothing is handed to you, so I
like
think
heroin.
Yeah, I think
except it doesn't kill you. Well, it virtually kills you many times, but anyway.
Yeah, I think we're super cool with giving Dark Souls 3 our first game of the year for what that means. This year was very solid. I think there was a lot of great games that came out this year. It's even hard to narrow it down. And just remember that just because some people think that one game's phenomenal and a game isn't good, it really all depends on what you appreciated the most and what you like the most. So, all of these lists are completely biased. They're based on opinion. Nothing is, unbiased. Nothing's objective.
No one has played every single game that came out this year and is also purely objective, because purely objective doesn't exist.
Exactly. So yeah,
except in math.
Just a recap before we close out the show. Our top 5 are as follows: Overwatch, Inside, Quantum Break, Uncharted 4, and Dark Souls 3. This has been episode 40 of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. We're going to be heading on holiday break now. We could go through our spiel of what we're going to be playing, but I think it's kind of they're holidays. There's so much going on. You don't really know exactly what you're going to get time for, but we'll just say that we're going to be playing video games, and we'll try to get in as many as we can and as many as we want to get in. Thank you guys for listening to us for the first 3/4 of a year that we've been doing this. We kind of started late in the year. I think we started mid-February. Well, this is episode 40, and we missed a couple, so that means we're off like 10 episodes, which is like 2.5 months. So like middle March, I think, is when we started. I'm not too sure.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully you join us for the next year, when we're going to try to improve this as much as we can and get as many listeners and followers. And that being said, if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube and you're listening to this on iTunes or Google Play or somewhere, just type in Controlled Interest on YouTube and it'll pop right up and you can subscribe. Even if you don't want to watch our YouTube videos and you like just listening to us, please subscribe if you can. It helps. Once we get to 100 subscribers, we can get a custom URL. Like I've said before, the more listeners we get and subscribers and followers, the better the show becomes, because we can get better equipment and we can make better content and so forth. Share us with whoever you can. It's the holidays. You're going to have plenty of family around you, whether you want to or not. And share a podcast with them. Let them know that we exist. I think we have a decent product here, and I think, if you're listening, obviously you feel that way too. So we'd appreciate any more ears we can get in pairs of 2 or 1. Maybe you have a cousin that only has 1 ear, but he gets to listen to us. That'd be great. I think that's it for the end of the year. We'll catch you guys in 2017. Any closing words on this year, Dom?
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys. Merry Kwanzaa, Merry Festivus for the rest of us. We'll see you guys next year.